Welcome to All Things LOCS, the show where we discuss everything related to leadership, operations, culture, and strategies for growth. Now, today, I'm super excited to have on our guest. We have Alexia Vernon, who is an award-winning author, keynote speaker, and the CEO of Step Into Your Moxie, which is a coaching and training company that helps leaders, especially in healthcare, biotech, and life sciences, amplify their voice, visibility, and influence. Now, she was dubbed a Moxie Maven by the White House Office of Public Engagement for her innovative approach to career and leadership development. And as an executive coach and presentation skills and high-stakes communication consultant, she has worked with Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, and healthcare organizations such as St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital, Medtronic, HCA Healthcare, and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. All right, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here. So what we're going to start with first, because honestly, there's just so much that we can discuss here. We talked a little bit in the green room. We did a call about a month ago, and there's so much I really just want to dive into. But really want to lean in onto what you're actually doing at a high level nowadays, which is really helping people speak and find their voice. And really, where I want to maybe start is for you. Why is that just so important? And why it's a passion for you? And why is it so important for people to find their voice and to have themselves heard in the right way where their message resonates with people that they're trying to connect with?
Good, important question.
Okay.
Most folks, whether they're emerging leaders, they're very experienced leaders, or they're somewhere in between, have what I refer to as an on again, off again relationship with their voice. Meaning, one moment it might feel like you are tap dancing on eggshells, striving to be liked, give the right answers, not be called out for failing to be enough of whomever you think other people or that moment requires you to be. But for more senior leaders, that by no means is the full story, because one has gotten to their role because they are competent in their communication typically. And there might be many moments when we are speaking to people who understand our lexicon and we're coming across as experts where it feels like we can make impact. And yet for most people, there are particular contexts where it feels like we are not fully in our bodies, we're in our heads. And so I really think of Step Into Your Moxie, my organization, as that conduit to help individuals, but also organizations be able to create cultures where people are able to speak up and influence in a way that works better for them, that works better for their organizations, but also ethically moves people to take action. So there's a lot
Yeah.
wrapped up in that I'm sure we're going to dig into today.
Nah, not at all. No, so I was gonna actually ask you based on it. What do you, when you say stuck in their head, especially at a leadership level, what do you typically see where you would say, all right, you're kind of stuck in your head. We need to work on actually getting your authenticity out a little bit more.
It can show up a few different ways, but the primary way is really second guessing and analyzing yourself as you're speaking. And so when that happens, it might feel like everything is perfectly fine in terms of delivery, but there's no humanity behind the information that's being shared. It might as well be ChatGPT or some other AI mechanism
Yeah.
that's delivering that content. And that can be particularly pronounced for people who are underrepresented. So women, people who speak English as a second language, folks who have been underrepresented in general because they've had to somewhat contort themselves into what a leadership model is supposed to look like that often has left them out. Being in one's head means you're also ruminating rather than having that self-trust to know that if you prepare strategically for important communication, what matters most is having the situational awareness to be able to read what's happening with the person I'm communicating with. What's the energy like in that room with other people? And being able to make strategic choices to flex how we're talking, the stories we tell, the anecdotes we share, so that it's not about us and rather it's about being able to connect and drive a solution forward.
Okay, yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up because you see this a lot on social media, right? This point of you need to be authentic. So then you have, I think some people take that a little bit, I don't know, maybe in the wrong direction where they say, well, this is just the way I am.
Yeah.
Maybe this is the way I speak, or I'm just a natural angry person. So that's how, that's how I communicate. So how do you balance? How would you tell a person to balance who you are, but then to your point about, is it helping you convey the message that you're trying to get across?
There's an important reframe there because authenticity suggests communication is about me. Yet, if I want you to do something different as a result
Yes.
of my communication, whether it's to think differently, behave differently, vote differently, whatever it is, and I'm authentic, that has nothing to do with you. And so, whether we're giving a presentation, we're negotiating, we're trying to pass legislation or anything else, authenticity is important from the standpoint of we don't want to not be ourselves, but we need to gussy ourselves up in such a way that we're able to meet other people where they are and deliver our message in such a way that they can hear it and take action from it. And that's a piece that too many folks, whether the industry is healthcare, whether we're talking about financial services, government affairs, anything, that's often missing. And that's what is one of the contributors to so much communication breaking down in high stakes leadership environments.
Do you see that becoming an issue nowadays with regards to, I feel like there's a lot of tribalism going on, right? I mean, and it's not just political, but there's definitely a lot of the way we speak, we're going to congregate towards each other versus how do I connect with other people? So do you see that becoming an issue, or for the people that are really vested in actually becoming a high-level leader, do you think that's more of an advantage if they go down this pathway of not trying to speak just to one group versus how do I connect with everybody?
So 2025, when we're recording this, has been such an interesting year for our company in terms of the kinds of engagements that we've had. So I have had more conflict resolution, team building, navigating differences than any other point.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting to me because with changes that have been happening in society, there was a concern that some of this work would be irrelevant, and quite the opposite has happened.
That's
That
good. Okay.
it's been happening quite a bit at the team level, and there's also operating in the background technological advances. So as more and more people are using AI as the primary way that they communicate digitally, when they have to communicate face to face or on a Zoom call with another human and they're not having technology dictate what they're going to say, the ability to do that well is atrophying.
Yeah.
And so as a result, people are often not communicating in a way where emotional intelligence is driving the conversation. Most of us lean either too candid or too kind. And the best communication, especially in high stakes environments, or if we get to healthcare specifically, is a fusion of both of those things. And so, like any muscle, if we're not consistently buffing it up or flexing it, it's not strong. And so I do think that if we look at the political landscape of only wanting to talk to people who share a perspective or worldview that's similar to ours, if we look at technology taking away a lot of our communication tasks, but not, at least for the moment, being able to replace how we communicate with other humans, it makes sense that this is a moment where then when people have to work together, even if they're working primarily remote, that communication is breaking down, people are having conflicts, or if it's not overt, there's this like underlying current of passive aggressiveness that I hear that's getting worse for a lot of folks who are working together on teams face to face in pressure filled environments.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So you're almost making it seem like it's a real differentiator, right? If you could be that person to develop these skills and not, we talked a little bit about in the green room, so to speak, about not just relying on your title or your level of expertise that you may have, but how to really separate yourself. I mean, I think nowadays a lot of people, they're looking for medical advice on ChatGPT, right? So it's what's going to prevent the person from doing that versus coming to see you in the office, and it's that ability to articulate in a way that helps you connect. When we're talking about specifically healthcare, that's a huge issue, right? Being able to just connect with the person that's in front of you, whether it's an employee, but certainly when it comes to a patient and a doctor. And I know, it's an area that you work with. What do you see as the biggest challenge with those individuals, doctor or healthcare provider to patient? What do you think is the biggest challenge for them in terms of being able to connect and just articulate a message that resonates with the patient?
Yeah, I'm going to take a step back for a moment in terms of, and I promise I will get back to your
Yeah, that's all
question.
good.
In an era where before we ever see a clinician or a provider, we can go to Yelp, we can go to Health Grades. Like there are numerous sites we can go to. And we know that most reviews are not simply about technical excellence.
Yes.
It's about the office experience. It's about whether we felt centered and seen in the exchange that we had with the clinician. That's driving a lot of reviews. And so to go back to this question of why does it matter? If you are in a business of running a practice where it matters if it's profitable, because for some clinicians it doesn't, right? They're hired full time, they don't care. But for
Yes.
those who have their own practices, No longer are we in an era where medical expertise, being a phenomenal surgeon alone, is enough. People care about bedside manner. It's in reviews, people make decisions that way. And so sometimes when we've had practices that we've worked with, before I ever step foot in the door, I tell them, how important is it to you that this is the reputation that your practice has, excellence in XYZ, but that this is what the experience will be like? And they say, it shouldn't matter because our physicians came from XYZ medical schools. They did these residencies. They're experts in this kind of robotic technology. And they're not wrong that in terms of outcomes, that matters deeply. But what we also know from more recent research is the ability for a patient to ask questions and feel like those questions were answered, to feel safe, not just physically, but emotionally, to have psychological safety and trust, and to be able to ask questions actually does impact outcomes. Not just will they stay working with that provider, but like, will they be able to heal?
Yeah.
And I see that the practices that recognize this are doing an exceptional job then of being able to create online messaging that matches. So whether that's YouTube videos where they're answering common questions, or sharing excerpts from surgeries and being able to narrate why their approach is something that people travel all over the world for, or simply just letting people get to know the providers in a practice. Like, there's some really great examples out there. And I want to flag that because so often we focus on everything's horrible,
You
and
don't say.
no clinicians understand how to speak with executive presence and tell great stories. And, the truth is somewhere in between.
Yeah. It's funny I mentioned that. I want to dive into that executive presence in a second, but you said, talk about psychological safety, just in terms of being able to give people the platform to ask questions, right? Because I know there's definitely a number of people out there that'll say, hey, look, I ask, does anybody have any questions? And I get nothing in return. So that tells me, okay, we're good. What is typically happening in that moment,
Oh, yeah.
whether it's an employee or a patient? What's happening in that moment that they're not recognizing the truth of what they presented and how that affected the person they're speaking to?
This is such a great question because, first of all, it's great if a clinician or a leader is saying, do you have any questions, to start with? Because
Yes,
sometimes that doesn't even happen.
Correct.
But let's assume it does and there's silence. It can mean a variety of different things. One, somebody's thinking. Our nervous systems are jacked up. Oftentimes, if we've just had a difficult diagnosis, or if we're having a pre-surgical
Yeah.
appointment and we're worried. And so sometimes it can take a moment to be able to come back into our bodies if we're on the patient side to find the words to ask. It also might mean, though, that we don't want to let our provider down and ask a question that we feel like we should know the answer to. I've been in that position, even though I do this work when I've been on the patient side. I've had experiences where, in the last year, I had a couple of different diagnoses, vocal cord polyp, where I had to have vocal cord surgery, and also a breast cancer diagnosis.
It's unfortunate.
And in both cases, I specifically sought out providers that I knew would not only be excellent and whose decision-making I trusted, but who I knew were exceptional at creating safety for patients to be able to ask difficult questions. And I can remember in one case I said, because there was that trust there, to my vocal cord surgeon, I need a minute because I'm feeling so much right now to find the words for the question. But if I didn't do this for a living, I probably would have just said, nope, I'm fine. So what we know in the world of being able to create psychological safety, and I'm going to look at it in a clinical context, is sometimes it's not just the verbal, it's also what the face is doing. It's the nonverbal, the gestures. So sometimes it's even putting out a hand. And if you don't have that relationship where it's appropriate to touch, even just doing this and extending a hand and saying, we've got time. If there's anything, think about it. If it comes up afterward, put it in an email. But reiterating, oftentimes then the question comes because it's been reinforced. We do questions here. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. And I've had this conversation with some primary care physicians in town in Las Vegas who said, if I asked if they had questions, I would be here. I couldn't be here for 15 minutes. It would go on endlessly. And while there might be some outliers who ask a few too many questions, the research consistently shows that when you ask people if they have any questions, the visit is actually shorter. You get less calls, you get less cancellations. And so taking a little bit of time to do that is actually a strategic choice in terms of driving productivity
Yeah.
for those clinicians.
Yeah, it's you're trying to save 2 minutes now, and then you end up spending.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely something I've seen in practice. It's I would go with as many questions as I possibly could with the person, and I always find it interesting when the patients say, I don't want to be that patient of asking too many questions." And as I always have the same response: an informed patient is a better patient. Like they know what to expect.
Hmm.
It eliminates, like you said, a lot of the maybe questions, or maybe I didn't get my question asked, so why would I come back? So it
And it
eliminates.
increases
Yeah, that's what I'm
compliance. I
saying,
don't
right?
love the word
Yes.
compliance because it, suggests that the relationship between clinician and patient is a punitive
Yeah.
one. But oftentimes, lack of compliance, I mean, there's the socioeconomic factors of it was hard to be compliant because I had to go back to work sooner than I was supposed to because I've got to provide for my
Yep.
family. But sometimes it's a lack of knowledge. Going into XYZ procedure, I didn't realize I was supposed to not take that medication. It wasn't on my list. But if I'd had the chance to be able to say, you've mentioned these herbal remedies, I'm not supposed to take 7 days leading up to surgery, but I'm also on this pill. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's those little things that then create complications, which is not good for the provider, and it's certainly not good for the patient either.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned, you brought up body language, and I find it's very interesting how many people don't associate the tone of our language and just like, you pointed out facial expressions and all those aspects of nonverbal communication, how we don't focus on that. And then we're often left kind of scratching our head. Why isn't somebody, why am I having trouble influencing people? Or maybe in the case of a patient, why are they not coming back in? So I'd like if you could maybe touch on the importance of that, because even though
Mhm.
I feel like it's such common sense, but it's really not. It's just we focus on the words,
Yeah.
but not the other stuff associated with it.
So there are 5 core competencies to vocal empowerment that we've identified over the last 2 decades. And when I talk about vocal empowerment, I mean possessing the mindset, the skill set, and the psychological safety to be able to walk into rooms, into conversations, onto stages, speak up for ourselves, for our teams, for our patients, and be able to ethically call people to take action. So that's a long
Yeah.
definition. But within that, it's not overly complicated. We tend to think that it's about having confidence and competence, but the research shows that's not actually why people don't speak up. Typically, they don't speak up because they either think change isn't going to happen, it's not worth it. They don't speak up because, well, they do worry that there will be consequences and they'll be branded as difficult and it will negatively impact their career. But another big one is that they just feel so much sensation in their bodies that it's hard to find the words and they shut down and don't know how to do it in real time. And you know that that's you if you've ever had an interaction that didn't go well, you got home and then you replayed it in your head over and over, all the beautiful, brilliant things you could have said
Yeah.
but couldn't access
Yeah.
in
I
that
think we all
moment,
do.
right? We've
We all do
all
that.
had
All right.
that
100%.
experience.
Yeah.
And so that's where these 5 components of vocal empowerment come from. One is being in a better relationship with our own inner voice so that we can coach ourselves in high stakes moments. One is physiological sensation, learning how to access our breath and calm our nervous system, which, we could lead a whole retreat on,
Yes.
but we won't today. But then the next 3 are the ones we more typically think of when it comes to communication: messaging, presence, and moving people to take action. And so what you're naming or asking about is this presence piece.
Yeah.
When working with somebody who's a real junior, sometimes presence does mean building in more vocal variety, and especially for women, not pitching up. It can sometimes mean being able to slow down our rate of delivery, because for people who are more junior, sometimes there's a tendency to speed up and talk too fast and it's monotone and we lose critical pieces of information. But for those who are more established or even senior executive leaders, what we mean by presence is not about proving our credibility. Like, check mark, that's done. It's not about avoiding filler words, because an a like, a so isn't inherently derailing. It comes back to that essence of having people trust us, of being likable, of people feeling that it's safe to tell us information we may not want to hear, ask us questions, or sometimes even question our judgment. And it takes a lot for us in our presence to create a space where people feel like that is possible. And so a lot of work that we do, that I do with more senior leaders, is helping them sometimes by doing emotional intelligence assessments and seeing how they're perceived, especially in a nonverbal way from the people that they work with, but also helping them do a better job of telling stories that connect with the people that they're trying to influence. And more importantly, how to be able to hold space for tough conversations, because so often for leaders, they think conflict isn't happening, and it's just because it's not happening when they're in the room. It's happening on the fringes, or people are keeping things inside, and especially in medical practices, that's why mistakes are going up. One of the misnomers of mistakes is that when you have more psychological safety, mistakes will go down, and that actually is not what happens, and Amy Edmonton points to this in her research. When we're identifying mistakes, they go up, but the egregious ones go down, right? So it's like we might notice that there's things that are wrong in our process, things that are not derailing, but the really heinous stuff that might lead to serious medical error or fatality, those eventually go down, and that's what we're striving for.
Yeah, so it's getting the data, but knowing what it's showing you, right? So it's like, oh my God, our error rate's skyrocketing. Well, is it, or are we more aware of it?
Right,
but
we're tracking
patients,
it now.
But now patients
It
are
was
getting
there, we just didn't know it was there.
or you chose to ignore it, but patients are getting better. You talked about executive presence. If you could expand a little bit on that, but what I think the biggest thing for that would be, you talked about the employee who's not the owner and is not the manager, and they're not maybe vested in having that same ability to influence quite as much, right? But then we know, to your point, if they can't influence patients to go through treatments, they don't get outcomes, or if they can't influence patients to come back in, depending upon what kind of discipline within healthcare, how does that translate long term? So if you had somebody, maybe that junior, would you advocate for them, hey, start this now, like start developing that executive presence now?
Yes.
Right. So what would that look like? And just,
Yes,
because there's that person listening, like, whatever, like, I'm not the manager, so who cares? I'll work on it when I'm the manager.
I mean, at a most basic level, it's one of the number one things that employees are hired for. It's also one of the number one things employees are fired for. And so if you care about your own career development, not just inside your organization, but in terms of future organizations, having polished communication skills, even if you are not a presenter by nature in your role, can be really important. So there's that. But also, most people don't leave jobs, as the expression goes. They leave other people because of conflict. And so one's experience of work tends to get a whole lot better when they have the tools to be able to communicate better, whether that's directly with patients, whether that's with fellow staff, whether that's with clinicians. And so what I've seen consistently is that when organizations make that investment in helping create a speak up culture, and speaking up doesn't just mean being a rabble rouser and calling out mistakes, but being able to express ideas, they become more innovative. So oftentimes they're able to develop better marketing and brand messaging, and they outcompete others who are in their space. Those are all positive things. But they also are able to work through hard things. And there's no organization that consistently is growing and thriving that doesn't proactively address hard things. And so being able to do that in a way where we possess the tools to not have it feel personal, but like we're able to air and ask questions, and our relationships are more intact as a result rather than degraded. Those are all, again, reasons why investing in this work can be so beneficial.
Which I definitely could appreciate, right? And you mentioned about growth and development, and that's a question that a lot of younger employees ask. What are you going to do to help me grow and develop? But then on the flip side too, it's all right, what are you doing on your own?
Yeah.
There's right. So it's almost where we're looking to be passive, but it's both, right? It's all right, what is the company doing, but what am I doing? And then this aspect too of being prepared for the role that you want to step into, right? So if you want to be that executive or you want to be that director, what are you doing to get you to the role? I find out just some individuals want to work on the skills once they have the role, but then they struggle versus, all right, prepare for it. So I love they brought that up. We talked about collecting some data, and you had this aspect of humanizing data. So I'm just curious to know if you can explain, like, what does that actually look like in the regards of a healthcare practice where people tend to be a little bit more objective and technical?
And I want to go back and then we'll go forward
Yeah,
again.
no problem.
Because you said so much good stuff there. I'm chuckling because oftentimes the first entry point into an organization, we might do some kind of manager training or an all staff retreat, and we do this work and we get great evaluations, and then in suggestions or comments, it's Why were the partners or the practice heads not here? Why are we being asked to elevate our communication skills? But all of the things that you talked about that are wrong are the
They're
things
not
that senior leadership is doing. I chuckle because that has not happened once. It's happened more times than I have fingers to
dead.
count. With that said, what has also happened is that when what I'm going to refer to as next in line leaders, when next in line leaders start to develop those communication skills, oftentimes that does get the attention of more senior leadership. And so then that'll often be our next stop, working with more senior leaders long term in terms of their communication skills. Sometimes it's about their thought leadership. So being able to take what's often a best kept secret about what they do well at their organization and get that messaging out, whether that leader is giving presentations, serving on panels, being on podcasts like this, etc. But to come back to now, I'm losing track. What was the question you asked? I
Oh
want to make
no, we
sure
don't
I
repeat
answer it.
questions. No, it's just about being able to. So we talked about data, right?
Data,
Right?
humanizing
Yeah, it's
data.
okay. I just we're collecting data, and even to your point about skill development. Obviously, there's still I do believe we want to see some data. How do you know if people are getting better and improving, what have you? But yeah, humanizing data. What does that actually mean, and what does it look like in a clinical sense?
Yeah, it looks different in different parts of the leadership role. So if I'm having a conversation specifically with a patient, as a clinician, it means how do I tell a story so that the data means something to that patient? So nobody wants to be told that, 80% of people with your diagnoses aren't going to get better. And it's not about saying, well, let's just talk about the 20% that do. But what does not getting better actually mean?
Yeah, it makes me feel like crap right away. As soon as you said,
Exactly.
it, I was like,
But also, I don't actually know what that means. So I could point to colleagues, friends who have diagnoses that are non curable, but they're not immediately terminable. So in a situation like that, 80% will never get to a place of remission where all signs and symptoms are gone. However, I want to share with you, and I'm going to just name this person Roger. In Roger's experience after this particular treatment, within 6 months, Roger was able to golf again. Roger was able to travel with his family, telling a story, obviously confidentially,
yeah,
changing details so that we
yeah.
don't know the
Roger down
person's
the street
identity.
at 34
Yeah,
on
of
Sycamore is like,
course.
wait a minute.
But that's huge because suddenly I realize, okay, this may not be gone, but am I going to be able to recover my quality of life? Will I be able to not just work and survive, but actually have physical exercise and enjoy? So that is one
Yeah,
anecdotal
I love that.
example. But it also might be with staff. So one of the things I hear a lot from healthcare, but really this is somewhat industry agnostic, is we had systems, we had processes, they worked. Now we're being told for whatever reason we've got to do this new thing and I don't like it. That's another place where stories can be helpful. So imagine what it looks like if, and let's say it's a particular way that we have to track patients now and their processes. And before we did it one way, but we didn't capture quite as much data. Now that person comes back 2 to 3 years later, they're presenting with different symptoms. It gives us an ability, let's say, to be able to very quickly on the call pull up information on that person so that we make sure we book the right kind of appointment with a provider, with the right provider, et cetera. So being able to narrate why this is something, we're not just telling you to do it, but this is the benefit and how it will ideally make your job easier. Then there's how do we humanize data if we're presenting? So right now we've got a number of clients who are in either startups that are related to cancer diagnostics. We have some folks who are in R&D for other kinds of innovative healthcare organizations who are constantly having to present, whether that's to funders, to board members, to other key stakeholders. Most people at that level, they know how to put a bunch of data on a slide. That's no problem. But how can you take those numbers and turn them into stories that move people to take action? Whether those are patient stories in terms of people that you've served, whether those are potential people who might never have to experience a particular outcome because your technology is diagnosing it sooner. There's so many different ways. And for clinicians, and really for most people, they haven't had a lot of experience in communication. They might have taken a presentation skills course, but it's pretty rare in medical school that you're going to
Yeah,
get
that's zero.
taught
Yeah.
how to be a compelling storyteller and have TED caliber speaking skills. But if you talk to a surgeon and said, imagine if you had a class or two and you went into surgery and you were going to be excellent. They would laugh and that would be horrifying. Unfortunately, that does not happen. But yet we don't have those same conversations about either communication skills that are interpersonal or presentation skills. And yet we have this false expectation because we're smart and we're well educated in one area that it will naturally translate to the other. And it doesn't. It might make somebody a quicker study if they're open to that development. But that's what we say to a lot of our clients who want to be good and who recognize that they're absolutely fine. But they really want to be standout thought leaders that have a following where people will come from outside of their geographic area to seek treatment. And in most cases, there is a communication component to how they're presenting their information and how they're allowing potential people to get to know them that's missing, but once addressed can be that thing that just catapults a business.
Whew, that was gold. What is it that you think, because you mentioned something really important there, which is just the overall lack of training that we get in general communication. Certainly, it's not even just healthcare. Like every industry across the board, for the most part, doesn't really get much in terms of communication training. And we always say communication is one of the most important things in relationships, but then most of us don't really work on improving it. And I'm just curious to know, being at your industry, what do you think is the limiting factor that holds most people back from actually just working on their communication?
Habit, not knowing that it's a thing you want to be doing. I don't think that it's bad intent, right?
No,
I assume
definitely
positive
not.
intent
Yes.
in most situations. And with this one, I suspect there's a awareness, I'd say, since 2020 that mental health is something everybody has, whether it's good, bad, or more likely than not, it's somewhere in between those two poles. And if you want to have flourishing mental health, there is benefit to working in an ongoing way with some kind of mental health practitioner or therapist. I think as a society, we've moved in that direction. I don't think we've moved that way necessarily in terms of communication. People who have to speak for a living might have some awareness, or they got picked to give an important keynote or an industry talk. Lots of people will come to us initially because they booked a TEDx talk, so they understand this is an important talk that will live online. I want to do an exceptional job. But the truth is, your day-to-day communication will actually have a lot more bearing on your success probably than a TEDx talk. And so I think there's just some re-education about that truth, but also making the process simple. It doesn't mean that you have to go to school and it has to be hard and boring. And there's a lot of presentation training that is developing people to present in a way that they're never going to have to present. It's like building the exact opposite skills we're trying to develop, where people weed out filler words and they puff up and they posture and they're trying to be extroverts and they're fist pumping. But that's not the context. They've missed the assignment, if you will. And so I suspect that's why a lot of our clients continue to work with us, is because we understand what we're striving to do with communication is this humanizing in such a way that whether somebody is going into a negotiation, whether somebody is sitting down to record YouTube content for their medical practice, they're giving a speech, or more likely than not, they're having to deliver feedback on the regular to their staff and talk to patients, that if you want to be better at something, prioritize it, put a little bit of work in. It doesn't have to be hard, and that's how you'll see results.
Yeah, that last one definitely resonated with me, giving feedback, because I was horrible at that. And then after a while, I just stopped doing it because it wasn't leading to anything positive. People either left. I got two groups of people. They either left the room confused because they didn't understand what the hell I was just talking about, or they left pissed off because I just said something that really got to them in the wrong way. So I really appreciate that, because that's definitely an area we don't really associate with communication skills per se. It's just, I'm going to tell you what you're screwing up and and how to get better. And then it's just, all right, how do you deliver a message? And especially nowadays, it's really being able to deliver a message with kindness that creates impact and helps the person grow. And, we talked a little bit before about those personality styles, when you have somebody who's very just to the point, that high D on a disc, and I'm just going to tell you exactly what it is because that's the way I am. And then the person's leaving just really pissed off at you. So I love that you brought that up, because that is a real huge thing that I see from just even people that I'm working with, where it's just, how do I tell them in a way that doesn't hurt their feelings, but actually creates what we're looking to create, which is an outcome and them getting better.
Yes. And just as importantly, how do we create a pathway where they understand the behavioral development that has to change? So
Yes.
even if I'm somebody who loves direct communication, and I'm much better now in my 40s than I was in my 20s, like you could tell me almost anything. And, my husband might say otherwise, but most people in a professional context, I'll listen, I'll hear it, and I'll take it in. But that doesn't mean I know what to do with it. And that's where a lot of
Mm,
leaders, especially in healthcare, miss the mark. Telling somebody you're not productive enough, you need to do XYZ faster. If they knew how to do it, they'd probably be doing
they
it
would have
by
done it.
now.
Yeah.
And so that's one of those pieces where there's a communication solution. How can you take whatever that skill or competency or behavior is and actually co-create a solution with that person? Because if they are a part of being able to say, this is where I get stuck, do you have a solution so that I can do A, B, C? And you co-create that together, and then you ask them, so what are you taking away? It's really developing coaching communication skills for clinicians so that then that person has much more accountability because they've been a part of putting together that plan. They have to articulate back, this is my understanding, this is how I'll be measured, this is when you're expecting to see change. So then if for any reason they fall a little bit short, you don't go next to, forget it, it wasn't worth it. It's like, okay, I saw some improvement, but then we started to recede, or this got better, but this didn't get addressed. And it gives us so much more insight about how do we continue the conversation. It's like
Hmm.
saying medical treatment isn't working because I had one visit with a physical
Yes.
therapist and my body isn't healed. It's rare that one time is going to fix anything. It's rare that one communication training will flag and fix everything. And that's okay. But if we are able to continuously build our tools for how to address communication, how to give feedback, over time it's going to get better and better. And ultimately, we measure if it's getting better based on whatever outcomes are important to you. So, for example, for some practices, it might be I want us to move from a 3-star practice rating to a 4-star practice rating overall over the next 6 months. That's something tangible.
Yeah.
So, how do we work on patient experience? And then it's pretty objective. Let's go back to those stars and
Yep.
see where they are. But for others, that's not what the thing is. It might be we want to work on our retention rate. So, if in our practice we are, losing uh, 25% of our staff within 18 months, let's say at a particular level, we don't want to get to 100% because then we're probably not doing a good enough job of letting the people who are the wrong fit go. But maybe we're striving to get to 40% or 50%. And so to come back to this notion of data, my background was in interdisciplinary studies. So I didn't come to data first. I came to the human stuff first and then got better at data. But where I think a lot of practices get wrong, and this is not, I don't want to harp on healthcare, lots of industries
Businesses in
do
general.
this,
Yeah.
is we look at the wrong data. Like we decide other organizations are using this data to measure success, but like what's the data that's relevant and meaningful for you? And
Yeah.
let's track one or two things rather than trying to track a bunch of things and feeling like we're just spinning.
Yeah. You spend more time at a computer screen looking over spreadsheets
Yeah.
than actually figuring out, all right, what's it telling us and how do we improve it? But I love what you said there too, because we do expect, I think that's probably a good word, expectations. How does that mismatch, so to speak, of one person versus the other? So, that patient who I just expect to get better in one time, or I have a conversation, even if it's a really good high level conversation with an employee, my expectation is now they're good. They're off and
Right.
running. They got it. And then you look back like, why are you still making mistakes? You talked to me once. I've been here for 4 years. That's not going to undo the last
Correct.
4 years of behavior. So yeah, there is that aspect. It's just constantly working on it. And then, I find too that even when we get to a point where we're really proficient, and you mentioned that patient retention level, it's all right. How do we still work on optimizing it and continuously getting it better and better? You mentioned small shift, but you mentioned TEDx talks.
Mm.
And you're coaching people on how to. I find, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I just feel either they're becoming more present through social media, but I just feel like they're getting more popular, and they're getting a little bit more notoriety, and people are gravitating towards getting their expertise out there. What would be, for somebody who's listening and they say, I don't want to do a TEDx talk, but I want to maybe get to a point where I can maybe have some skills competent to those individuals. What would be maybe like 2 or 3 things that somebody should start working on to just overall improve maybe their presence, their influence, and their overall communication skills that would be maybe similar, if you want to call that, to a TEDx speaker?
Sure. It's tricky to know what to focus on first if you have not received feedback from somebody who's earned the right to give you feedback. And so there's a few ways to address that.
Can I cut you off 1 second?
Yes.
From somebody who can give you the feedback that's credible, like explain that a little bit, because like we do, like I don't want to like go off on a tangent, but we do seek feedback from certain people in our life that might not be the right people.
Yes, or when I say they haven't earned the right to give it, they don't know how to give it. What they're giving you is personal preference.
Yes, there we go. Okay.
Whenever I have clients who are working on a presentation and they wanted to show it to people, there's a part of me that's like, oh, I don't want you to do that, because oftentimes you'll show it to your kid or to your partner or to your pet, and they're like, I don't like that part. Don't wear a green shirt. It's not helpful.
Yeah.
Ideally, it's somebody who understands the skills you're demonstrating in some way. They are truly conspiring for your success. And that's huge, because there might be somebody internally who knows what good communication or good whatever it is you're working on looks like, but there's competition there. Yeah. They maybe not overtly, but there's a piece of them that doesn't want you to succeed or might even want you to fail. And so that's why coaches are such a great thing, because they don't have an agenda. Their agenda is your success and your game plan. But once somebody knows they want to work on something, I'm a big fan of work on 2 to 3 things at a time, period. Or 1, but like 1 to 3, anything more than that, you won't make meaningful progress. And I'll share with you some of the things that are good starting places for most people. The best is if it's personalized to you. But for a lot of people who are junior, it might be weeding out vocalized thinking by learning, for example, every time you're not sure what to say next and your brain and your mouth are out of lockstep, stop. Take a breath, make eye contact, or look at the green light if you're on video and you can't see people's faces. And that will, if you consistently practice that in everyday communication, you will weed out within usually 90 to 120 days most of your filler language. Yeah. Not that I want anyone to do this, but I like to bring this up as an example. If you Google my name and you go back 15 or 20 years, you will find TV interviews that make me so uncomfortable because of how much filler language I use. So I say this as somebody who loved so's, loved crutch words, like absolutely, that using those principles played a profound role in being able to weed it out. For somebody who's more experienced as a leader, that's probably not the thing. What might be the most important thing is to start asking curiosity-driven questions and then zip your lips and listen. That's something I do with a lot of senior leaders in healthcare with their teams. Ask more questions like, tell me about something you've noticed here that we could be doing better. Zip it. Listen. Because the closer somebody is to the problem, the more likely it is they're also closer to the solution, because they can see it. If we could just do this, it would fix blank. But if they don't feel safe and there's not a culture of people being able to flag innovative ideas, so this is less about calling out problems and more about spotting problems and having a culture where we can name and own and champion solutions. So that's one thing. To go back to what you said, which is the TEDx talk. I love TEDx talks. When I first started teaching public speaking back in, 2006 or 2007, that was sort of my gateway into presentation skills development. In my first career, worked in educational theater, and I applied for a job where I thought I was going to be teaching theater for the City University of New York, and they gave me a bunch of public speaking classes and acting and improv. And I, at that point, hated public speaking. As a kid, I had a tongue thrust. The first time I ever gave a presentation when I was in 3rd or 4th grade, people laughed at me. I had a habit in those days of never presenting unless I had my notes and I could cling to them like a baby orangutan might cling to its mother.
Now, for those don't know, tongue thrust would be?
Pardon me?
Tongue thrust?
Tongue would come forward on certain consonant sounds, and it would give me a sound like a lisp.
Gotcha, okay.
I also had all other kinds of fun things like headgear and a jaw realigner because I was a thumb sucker. So I was a mess in this
All
region.
things that make you not want to speak.
Correct.
Yes.
But in teaching that class, specifically by bringing in TED, they didn't have TEDx at that time, I don't think, but TED Talks to students. And I should mention, I was at John Jay, which was a criminal justice college, to students who in most cases were not going to be public speakers, but they were going to be police officers. They were going to work in fire service. They were going to work in forensics. And giving them talks that evoked some kind of emotion, made them feel something, I got people giving some of the most potent, informational, and persuasive speeches. And that was when a light bulb went off. If this could happen with students who were seeing me at 8 a.m., who didn't really feel any connection to public speaking and were so early career that I couldn't even tell them these will be the benefits for you because I didn't know. Imagine what could happen if this was also a vehicle for being able to work on communication skills in other contexts. And now, while I've had, I don't know, more clients than I can count who've given a TEDx or a TED style talk. This last year, 2025, I got to work on my daughter's. She's 11 years old, and
Oh.
she gave a TEDx talk at TEDx Las
Wow,
Vegas.
congrats.
And I bring this up because it makes for a great story when people say, I can't be a great speaker. She's 11. And guess what? Tongue thrusts, they're genetic. Like, she had a lot of the same
Wow.
stuff that I did, but she also has been in rooms with me watching this work a lot of her life. And COVID was particularly helpful because she wasn't home, or she was home rather, not in school. So she was listening to stuff I was doing on Zoom. And so if at 11, and I'm very clear, she didn't come in with particularly special speaking skills. She's just worked at it through osmosis. And now she's built a speaking career of her own. She's got clients coming to her saying, we'd love for you to speak at this thing. And
my
who knows what
gosh.
she'll do with her life. She's ripe for so many things. I often will say when folks are like, I don't know if this kind of talk is in my future. It may not be. But if you're saying it's not because you don't know if you could do it, but you know that you have a big idea that's important, which most people in healthcare, they've got ideas that they want to spread. I would say, let's maybe think twice about how do you get the training to be able to develop this into a tour de force talk? Because if there's an idea that could create positive, potentially radical impact, why would you not want to use that or a different complementary platform to be able to have more impact beyond your immediate practice or circle?
Yeah, that's almost, and I don't know if it's like true or not, but it's almost like the saying, you're almost being selfish if you're right. You're keeping all the ideas to
Yeah,
yourself, and you're
I
not,
subscribe to
yeah,
that.
and you're not really helping to your point as many. I mean, that's honestly even why. I mean, I left New Jersey. I was working in a practice, and I mean, the practice was amazing, helping thousands of people. But then it's just the same idea. It's like a plateaued, but then it's all right. Can we make a bigger? If I can go back 4 years, maybe I could have done things a little bit different in terms of using my voice, like you're saying, to reach more people. But then it's all right. If you're in a brick and mortar, are you restrained? Still providing massive help, and you're still basically working with what you're passionate about, and but how do you maybe make it bigger, or so, and especially nowadays, it's not like you have to go on speaking tours if you
Right. I
want
want
you
to share
can,
a
but
story with
yeah,
you because this might resonate with some listeners who are in brick and mortar facilities, whether it's a hospital or a practice.
yeah,
So I had a client maybe 2 years ago who I want to be very careful not to give details. I think I can say his role because I'm not going to say where.
where
Yeah, and I've worked with several chief medical officers, and this particular chief medical officer had a diagnosis, and I'm not going to name what it was, and it really changed the way he thought about healthcare, but also specifically this disease, this condition, and he started to see a lot of holes when suddenly he was on the other side seeking treatment. And so he came to me through a mutual connection and said, I really want to develop this into a talk. And so he gave the talk a couple of times. He didn't launch a speaking career. But as he got close to retirement, his healthcare institution wound up launching a huge, massive study on this condition using the protocols that he's been researching. And so when you think about impact now, likely there's going to be a book when they publish the research once they're like a year or so into the future. But this might change treatment for lots of people who are impacted by this particular condition. And so, he could have said, why do I need to give a talk? But it was actually not about the talk. It was about the thought leadership and being able to reach, like you say, a bigger platform to make healthcare work better for a lot of people who have this particular condition and who've been undertreated.
for people who they're not in a leadership position, not looking to be in a leadership position, they don't want to open their own business. Why are these skills, regardless of your standing in life, why these skills are just relevant, really, for almost anybody to actually work on?
Day-to-day thriving. Today, before I came to do this interview, this morning actually, went to a pharmacy to pick up a medication. And I got there a little bit early before the pharmacy opened. So I was standing in line, the metal door was down, but I could listen to the conversation behind. And I always love overhearing conversations because it gives me really great data in terms of how are people in different industries seeing particular situations? What are they enjoying? What are they struggling with? And he was sharing with a coworker that he had stepped into a part-time pharmacy manager role and hated it, that he'd never had such bad anxiety. And he was so happy to be back, not in that role. And I could tell because it was the same voice. He came up to help me to get my prescription and ring me up, and he wouldn't make eye contact. Most likely, there was some neurodiversity there. And I could see how anxious he was. Like it was palpable. The issue was not management per se, it was he's a pharmacist. He hasn't, or a pharmacist, I don't actually know what his role is, but something in a
Yeah.
pharmacy. He hasn't developed those people skills. And so while maybe it feels better that he doesn't have to manage folks, he still has to deal with humans and hasn't addressed that. And all I could think to myself was, if he was able to develop some tools to calm his nervous system and to be able to navigate the discomfort that comes up in that vulnerable moment when you have to see somebody and make chit chat, his life would change profoundly. I don't know anybody whose life wouldn't be better if they had better communication skills at work, or with their families. So, occasionally I'll reach somebody who says, I'm an engineer or I do data. Like, I don't ever have to talk to humans. Although I would say more and more, you still have to have team
Yeah.
meetings, but occasionally that's the case. But I don't know a lot of people who work independently, never have communication with someone else. They have no friends, they have no family. They are just truly lone rangers. And so the quality of a life is built on the strength of our connections. And we know that in so much of the research on aging, that people live longer when they have a few deep relationships. They retain that social interaction. And so to me, this is also not just about communication to be a leader. It's about how to feel better, enjoy the quality of your life, and have more meaning.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, to your point, right? It's yeah, we've talked a lot on a few episodes even of just knowing what person fits what role, right? So there's a certain personality that is that engineer or is that accountant, versus maybe somebody who's at the front desk, but then not also pigeonholing yourself into just, well, it's a quiet introverted role, so I have to be like that all the time. Versus, all right, you can actually and probably should develop these skills because you are going to meet somebody
Yeah.
sometime. You're going to meet a human. So how do you connect with them? And I know that was honestly even just personal experience. I connected with people in a way that for me, and it was very made about yourself, which is what you said at the beginning. It's like, how do I speak? How do I want to communicate to everybody? And then you see the lack of response coming back to you. And just wondering at some point, all right, what am I saying or doing wrong? And how do you actually connect with people, even though, maybe you have a lack of empathy naturally, or you're just
Mm.
maybe a little awkward. It's, why should you want to develop those skills to be the person that other people need you to be?
Yeah, and I would say that introverts oftentimes make phenomenal communicators once they're emancipated from having to hold the microphone and be funny and hold court, and can ask more questions and mirror back what they hear being said. And that empathy gets harnessed as a superpower to be able to say things like, that sounds really hard. Tell me more. Is there anything I can do to help? And I'm an introvert. People are sometimes surprised about that, but there's nothing that fuels me more than being home, reading a good book. I can only do so much during the course of a day. Even when I'm on tour or speaking a lot, I still have gobs of quiet time.
Yeah.
I'm married to somebody who would probably say that, he has moments of social awkwardness. I think we all do, but there's some folks who just are maybe a little bit more wired to that than others, and is definitely an introvert. And developing tools to be able to improve communication, again, more successful in one's role, but also feel better, less time ruminating and wondering, am I smart enough? Am I funny enough? Am I experienced enough? Am I something enough? It cultivates self-trust. And the more self-trust we have, not only do we feel better, but we're able to do better work in whatever field we're in because we're not second guessing ourselves. And that's another thing that I've seen for people who have more of a scientific, technical background. Others may not know the self-flagellation that's happening in their heads as they're judging themselves against some unachievable standard of who they think they're supposed to be. That's why inner voice is a part of that pyramid
Yeah.
of those 5 competencies.
There's a reason at least 5 days a week I go through a whole morning ritual, and that's part of it. It's just because I know the language I've spoken to myself in the past, or even
Yeah.
those you mentioned stories that we tell ourselves, just kind of the crap that we put on our own head that came from nowhere, but we not made it up. There's always a basis for something, but it's all right. You thought of this yourself, so therefore guard against it. Um, I'm curious to know because you had mentioned some health challenges. Just
Mm.
more so, I don't want to dive into the challenge themselves per se, but the year you had last year, has that shifted how you coach, teach, or your perspective on client interactions? Has anything shifted since you dealt with that and how you go about your day to day, maybe life and in business?
Absolutely. To go back to that crutch word I loved 20 years ago, but it's really apt here. Having so many experiences of healthcare, accessing it for myself, but also watching loved ones access it, in some cases for some difficult diagnoses. Not only does it show me examples where things worked really well, and I have had, because I've been very deliberate about picking out clinicians and treatment centers, some really wonderful experiences, also some really tough ones. But I'd say above all else, the thing that's always dictated what that experience felt like was communication in so many different ways. So whether it was communicating to get an appointment, whether it was communicating once I got to that office, whether it was communication in terms of what happened when I actually saw that clinician, or making sure I asked the right questions so that I was a good, compliant patient and could accelerate my healing. There's that's then informed. These are all the places where communication plays a role. And so with our clients, making sure they've been really strategic to think about how does that experience tend to go for their patients or for their staff and team. Some practices are really focused on the patient experience. Some are a little bit more focused on improving team culture. The best ones are looking at both
Yeah.
pieces because they work hand in hand. And so I think it's just given me opportunities. A lot of the work we do, I haven't really talked about this, but it's not, this is the 5-step process of what you need to do. It's very role play based. I use a lot of improv from that background in
Love it.
theater. And so it's experiential, it's fun. And as a result, learning transfers because it's not about having to memorize a bunch of complicated stuff. It's really giving people better instincts, more situational awareness to read cues, and then to know and to have that messaging in those moments, as well as the presence behind the messaging, to say things that are going to drive better outcomes. And so, yeah, I think it's absolutely enriched the way that I use role play specifically in healthcare because I can bring in real things that I've experienced or that I've witnessed, not just the knowledge of doing the work and the practice, but being on the receiving end.
All right. Love that you said all that. I want to pick on one little thing there that you said about role playing. And I've loved using that in my experience, but for you, how do you typically like to coach organizations on how to structure? Because that's definitely something where is it one-on-one? Do we do it in a big group? So what's your go-to way to do that in the most effective way possible?
A little bit of all of the above. And what I mean by that is oftentimes when people haven't been trained in role play, the instinct is to have a scenario, you let 2 people role play it. The problem with that is you don't know what you don't know. And so you're recreating what the problem is that you're trying to address, and there's nobody in that mix who can actually give feedback. Or worse, people don't take it seriously and they joke around, and it's a big old waste of time. What we do and what comes from the applied theater world, which was my first life, is having the facilitator, whether it's me or we have over 50 people who are vocal empowerment certified who've gone through our training, so they might be facilitating something as well. But they play the role of the difficult, tricky person. And so that could be a patient, that could be a nurse. It almost doesn't matter who they are. And the people in the room can take turns coming to the front of the room and playing the role sort of themselves, but it's never themselves. It's always an archetype so that they have that distance. It's not them, it's a character that they can step in and out of. Then that allows the facilitator to adjust what it is that we say based on what it is that they're saying. So if they say something that is not so great for psychological safety, we might start to fidget or look away. But on the flip side, if they say something that is empowering, that promotes shared decision making. We might say something in return like, thank you. I felt really good right then. And so that allows not just the person who's stepping up, but everybody else who's watching to get a sense of, oh, these are the behaviors that are working. These are the behaviors that aren't. It doesn't become just learning for that one person. And we have that person come up maybe for 2 minutes and then somebody else jumps up. So it allows lots of people to be able to get that experience. But in all of our evaluations, we are consistently told that while it was hard, it was sweat inducing at moments. That was the piece where they were able to really understand what they want to do differently. And as a result of getting some wonkiness out in the role play, that's what also allows learning to happen afterward. It's not just, I took an assessment. I answered 50 questions and now I know what I'm supposed to say in a tricky moment. What we know is that a lot of people in organizations, especially in biotech, they can pass those. They get 100%, but they still don't speak up. And that's the piece that's often missing, is the actual practical application of doing it and learning how to be able to navigate the discomfort in those moments and still do the thing you're supposed to do.
Love that. And I will say that definitely, that's something I know I didn't do early. I mean, I got to a point where I at least started role playing, but you see some challenges of just day-to-day interactions with people, and employees would always say, "How do I respond right when that happens?" And it's until it actually happens the first time, it's yeah, how do you actually train on that for an experience you've never had? And it's role playing. So there we go. I love that. So let's talk about this event that you're doing. Tell us everything you got going on, and I'd love to hear about what's just next and exciting in your world.
Yes. So coming out of vocal cord surgery back in 2024, one of the decisions I made was I really wanted to help other people with their voice, specifically on stages, because that had been a piece of my professional life that was missing for almost 18 months. I was doing lots of events, but they were small events because I couldn't project, since I had a big old polyp that was getting in the way. And we'd had a lot of people who'd said, locally in Las Vegas, would you think about doing some kind of intensive that encapsulates all these things you're talking about for organizations where maybe there isn't budget to bring someone in, but like I could self-nominate myself, or maybe my organization would sponsor me to go and do this work. And so the event is happening February 27th through the 28th in 2026. And the event is called Soul Stirring. It has absolutely nothing to do with the soul. It's not religious, but it's how do you get to that kind of quality that connects not just to the head, but in the heart, whether you're presenting at the front of a room, whether you're speaking to staff, whether you're on a stage. And what's kind of cool is that each person who comes also gets to work on a variety of different stories. And on the final day, we have a professional film crew who comes in and films each person telling a 2 to 3 minute story on a stage in front of the rest of participants. And so they get to use that in their speaker marketing. And it's a small event, so we cap it at 16. Last year it sold out. And the goal is for everybody to get lots of face time. They're not in their seats listening, they're up actually practicing these skills and getting feedback.
Wow, that sounds amazing. If somebody wants to sign up for that event, where would they go?
Yes, they can come to my website, stepintoyourmoxie.com, and under events, there will be a link for Soul Stirring.
Amazing. And if somebody wants to do some coaching with you, website?
Website, stepintoyourmoxie.com for that as well.
Alexia, this was amazing. I really would like to keep going for another hour or two, but I want to be respectful of your time. This was phenomenal. Hope you guys got a lot out of this. This was high level information. Honestly, you just make me want to go home and start working on my communication right now. So thanks so much for coming in. This was great.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Catch you guys next time.